I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. I welcome my colleague and co-host, Thaddeus McCarter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes, and our colleague, Andrew McCarthy of the National Review Online. We are in pursuit of a wonderful story, which is in how in 2016, the FBI and other agencies worked assiduously to deal with the challenge of what is to be done with Mrs. Clinton's email and the homebrew server and the suggestion, allegation, suspicion case that she and her lieutenants had violated laws having to do with classified material. What to do with that, and at the same time, what to do with Donald Trump, this surprising candidate emerging from the Republican primaries who may or may not have had links to Russia and whose campaign workers may or may not have had links to Russia at the time. Andy, a very good evening to you. Your most recent analysis puts together something called mid-year exam, shortened to MYE, and Crossfire Hurricane. What is mid-year exam, and how does it link to Crossfire Hurricane, the Russiagate investigation? Good evening.
Good evening, John. Well, mid-year exam was the code word that the FBI assigned to the Hillary Clinton emails caper, and it hooks up temporally and substantively, I believe, to the Crossfire Hurricane, which was the code word assigned to the Trump-Russia investigation. The interesting thing that I've gone through that I've determined going through the timeline is how inextricably linked these investigations were, not only as a practical matter, but in the consideration of the FBI, as we see the window into that from the text messages between the FBI lawyer Lisa Page and Special Agent, counterintelligence agent Peter Strzok. They constantly communicate, and it's interesting because the two of them are on the counterintelligence team that handles both investigations, and unusual in that the Clinton emails investigation was actually a criminal investigation, at least ostensibly, and yet it was handled mainly by counterintelligence agents. So they handle both investigations, and we see that they consider them together. And the interesting thing I tried to emphasize today was that on May 4th of 2016, when it became inevitable that Donald Trump would be the Republican nominee when Ted Cruz dropped out of the race, the first reaction these agents had was, well, now the pressure is really on to end mid-year exam, meaning to end the Clinton investigation. They indicated that the pressure was on, and it was clear what the pressure was. The pressure was to shut the investigation down, which is precisely what they did. It was a foregone conclusion, even by May, that there would be no charges returned, and that's precisely the way it ended up. And I don't think that the determination, and it was assiduous was a great word, John. It was an assiduous effort to shut down that investigation. I don't think that can be sensibly divorced from the fact that they were clearly of a mind to be concerned that the Trump campaign was infected, at the very least, by Russia.
That is?
Andy, in your piece, you talked about some of the origins of this being in the definition of what is early spring. Okay. And you had mentioned an NSC meeting, I believe Mr. Comey had?
Well, that's right. We can't seem to get a firm date on this, Thaddeus, but despite the fact that the Intelligence Committee, that would be the Devin Nunes House Intelligence Committee, even though they interviewed many witnesses who have knowledge of or even were on the National Security Council, or at least participated in some of their proceedings, nobody seemed to be able to come up with a more precise date than late spring for when there was a very important National Security Council briefing by FBI Director Comey on Carter Page. And the reason the date is of importance is whether late spring means sometime in April to mid-May or mid-May to June, The fact of the matter is it was long before Carter Page went to Russia, which we were initially told was the big seminal event in kicking off the Trump-Russia investigation. And it was long before the FBI knew of the Papadopoulos conversations with the Australian ambassador, where he passes along information from a source who claims Kremlin ties, that the Kremlin has thousands of Hillary Clinton emails. So even though those things were far in the offing and not on anyone's radar screen at that point, the FBI thought it was important enough to inform the National Security Council, which is the main officials of the government who were involved in national security, to inform them of Carter Page. And the only things that had happened at that point were that Carter Page and Paul Manafort had joined the Trump campaign, and they both had some Russia baggage unrelated to the 2016 election. So it seems that what really kicked off this investigation was concerns, if you want to put the best faith view on it, concerns in the Obama administration about the fact that a couple of people who came into the Trump campaign had some questionable ties to Kremlin-backed actors. And if you want to have a more cynical take on it, they saw an opportunity to exploit that could be politically damaging to Trump.
There are two different operations here. This is why I'm trying to conceive of these as silos, that popular term that they use in big business these days. One silo is the mid-year exam. That's Mrs. Clinton's emails. And that happens to be the same team that's going to work on the other silo that eventually emerges, called the Russiagate investigation that we have now, although they give it that crossfire hurricane code at the FBI. So these are two different silos, but they're disproportionate silos. You pointed out, Andy, that one is a criminal investigation and the other one is counterintelligence. However, there's even more than that. Look at it from the point of view of March, April, May of 2016. The mid-year exam is gigantic. It's fact-based. It's thousands of emails. It's lots of interviews. It's press stories for a year, at least at this point. It's the FBI taking over the investigation after there were complaints in the summer of 2015. And it's criminal risk to Mrs. Clinton and a number of her significant lieutenants who will go into the administration. In addition, the polls show that she is a clear winner of everything, not only the Democratic nomination, but the presidency. All the way through. Every poll in the world believed she was going to win right up until the moment she didn't. And then we have this other thing, Crossfire Hurricane, which we have reason to believe at the FBI doesn't begin until Peter Strzok opens the counterintelligence investigation in July 31st, late July, long after the mid-year exam concern that Lisa Page voices on May 4th. So they're disproportionate. They can't see the future. That's the puzzle here. If they're interleaved, do you believe at this point that Crossfire Hurricane was created to answer in some fashion the risk that mid-year exam could not be shut down? Is that why they did that? They wanted a smear to play before the election just in case that email thing got away from them.
Well, I don't think the email thing, John, ever had a chance of getting away from them. Because there was no way that the Obama Justice Department was going to charge Mrs. Clinton. And the FBI, even if they were willing and cooperative with the Justice Department in that outcome, it was not in their ability to do anything about it. They simply that is simply a Justice Department call. And after President Obama weighed in, I think in April of 2016, saying that he really didn't want Mrs. Clinton charged, and basically rewriting the statute under which she was being investigated, it was a foregone conclusion that she wouldn't be charged. I think the thing here is the goal that the Obama administration had was to not charge Mrs. Clinton, but make it look like she had been cleared after a thoroughgoing investigation. And in order to project the appearance of a thoroughgoing investigation, the FBI has to check all the boxes that it checks in a normal investigation of this kind, including things like interviewing the main subject and getting its hands on all of the central evidence. that hadn't been done yet when it became clear that Trump was going to be the Republican nominee. So I think there was suddenly some urgency on their part that this thing could not drag out forever, that it was important to bring it to a close so that she could get about the business of campaigning full-time with full concentration against Trump. And I think with respect to Trump, the two things that they were trying to accomplish politically were to damage him as a candidate, and then when that didn't result in his defeat, to hamstring him as a president. So I think these things are connected, but I don't think there was ever any chance that Mrs. Clinton would be charged.
That is?
Andy, we've seen, and you mentioned in your article, the continued premise that somehow the DNC was hacked by Russia. We saw Comey, Clapper, Brennan, and I believe Admiral Rogers kind of assented to it, the consensus that maybe it was the Russians did it. And now there's talk about Mueller can't bring this into court because it doesn't work. Are we ever going to get to the bottom of whether that was a hack by the Russians or whoever did it? Is it a thumbnail? What is it? Because it's the origin of this whole Russiagate narrative, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it certainly is the origin of it. I don't think that we're ever going to get more than what we have now, which is an intelligence assessment that says that there's a strong probability that they did it. That's all an intelligence assessment really is. The intelligence does not proceed on the same rules of due process and evidence and burden of proof that criminal trials do. So we will never get the satisfying level of proof from an intelligence assessment that you would if this were challenged in court. But I really don't think it could be challenged in court. It's not impossible that it could, but I think the government has left itself very vulnerable, that is the FBI and the Justice Department, if they want to run with that theory that the Russians hacked the servers of the DNC. Even if we all believe it to be true, even if we all believe the intelligence report is on the up and up, the fact is that the FBI didn't take control, didn't take possession of the main evidence, which is the server itself, and it relied on the data production of a DNC contractor, which has the principals of which have pretty serious financial ties to Mrs. Clinton, or had him to the Clinton campaign. So that's not to say a jury couldn't be convinced that that kind of a forensic examination was trustworthy enough to rely on, but it's a major, major jury issue in a trial.
We're speaking with Andrew McCarthy of the National Review Online. Mid-year exam, Crossfire Hurricane. Those are the two operations that are being examined. And Thaddeus McCutter's with me. When we come back, we're going to go exclusively, with Andy's help, to Crossfire Hurricane. Because origins. When did it begin? How did it begin? That remains a major concern, a major pursuit, because therein lies not only the motive but the explanation for this expanding investigation of Russia in the American political system. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.